All right, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to talk about the hierarchy of meaning, the hierarchy of reality in which we perceive the world. Even the hierarchy of truth, really, because truth it can be deepened. It can be different forms. It can be symbolic. It can be beyond this modern, rational, scientific, materialistic, empiricistic, if that's even a word, but beyond this empiricism, because the modern mind has has told you that if you can't taste it, measure it, feel it, perceive it, break it down to its atomic level, to its chemicals, then it can't be real. If it can't be tested, it can't be true. But this isn't actually how you live your life. This isn't actually how you perceive meaning, how you ascribe meaning to yourself. And we know this because post-enlightenment, we've tried these different forms of self-help, of self-improvement, of health and diet schedules and sleeping schedules and all these new trends to help give us meaning, but they're shallow. They're trends. They don't stay over time. And I wanted to give you a way of thinking that's beyond just this physical matter. That's beyond just this scientific thinking of, oh, the only thing that's true, the only thing that's real is things that I can materialistically grasp and see, because that's just not how you see the world. When you go to your laptop, okay, or even a tree or a speaker or a cup, you don't see the laptop for its chemical and atomical makeup. You see it as meaning. It projects a meaning. You see something to browse the web on. You see like a hyper library of knowledge, a hyper book, or a way to entertain yourself or do work on. When you see a cup, you don't see the glass and the material matter of it and the chemicals and atoms, whatever. You see a narrative. You see a meaning, something to hold liquid, something to drink liquid out of. And there's hierarchies of that. And today I'm just going to share that with you, how that works, okay? And the Christian this is very deep into the Christian insistence on how the world is structured, okay? And I want you to understand why that the Christians, especially like how these stories came to be. I'll try and reference some biblical stories as well in this. But let's start out with, there seems to be a ultimate pinnacle of structure in the world, okay? So what science gets right is that there is an order. There is the Christians or the philosophical insistence would be logos, okay? There is a logos, which means meaning, structure, order, purpose, rational mind. There seems to be that implicit in the universe. There seems to be something like that across the universe. So we could call that divine order. We could call that logos, okay? Which is also Christ's name. Christ is the logos made flesh. So we'll get into that, what that means, because that is actually how we perceive reality as well. So at this pinnacle of the hierarchy meaning, we have divine order, logos, okay? And our modern mindset is physical matter, is this materialism, okay? Not materialism, I want to get as many, like in Fight Club, I want to get as many IKEA desks or whatever furniture as possible. Not materialism as in obtaining objects. Materialism as in reductionism, breaking things down just to their atoms, and that's all that life is, okay? A bunch of chemicals and protons and atoms flying around. That is how we perceive the world. That is new, okay? This is literally since Newton. What is that, like 1600s? That's literally since Newton. We've started thinking about this, okay? Since the scientific theory. Nobody in the past was testing things and running tests 20 times and doing validities and giving it to 20 other people to see if it's not biased and peer reviews. Nobody was doing that, okay? To think that the people who wrote the Bible were doing that is just naive. There wasn't this, what is Jonathan Pajot? He says, this forensics analysis of life, okay? It wasn't like that. That's very new, okay? So there's this divine order, there's this logos at the top, and we are perceiving at the very bottom of this meaning hierarchy as physical matter. But there's stuff in between that we don't actually think, that we don't actually understand, because why do I perceive this cup, okay? If this cup is, if we go from the top down, if this cup has this divine order, this divine meaning, this structure, this purpose, okay, this cup, why am I seeing it not as a purpose? Why am I blocking my natural perceptions of, oh, this is something to hold liquid out of, to drink out of, and instead trying to see it of, well, it's just glass, it's just atoms, it's just particles. There seems to be a gap here, because when you go live your life, when you go do something, when you go have a story with friends, you know, you go out and then you're telling your other buddy about this story, you don't tell them every single detail of the night. You don't tell them, oh yeah, you don't reduce it down to every single fact that you could possibly do, because there's an infinite number of facts. There's an infinite number of facts in a cup, in a laptop, okay? So you have to figure out what is the meaning, what is the purpose of that, what is the divine order and structure and logos and meaning and purpose of that event. Now let me try and recall everything to tell that story, to display that, okay? So you literally perceive the world that way, as this pinnacle, this divine order. You don't actually perceive the world as, well, yeah, me and my buddy, we took 20 steps, and then we took a left, and then we sat down at this table that was made of bamboo, and then we, I don't know, we just like said a couple of words in language. You don't do that. That's not how you actually live in the world. You don't even know what I was trying to tell you right there. I was trying to say how me and my friends went to dinner. I mean, you could maybe get a grasp, but still. And I missed plenty of other things. Why didn't I tell you about the weather? Why didn't I tell you about what we were wearing? You know what I'm saying? We literally perceive the world through this sense of meaning. Okay, so that is at the top. We have this meaning, this divine logos. We're going to call it logos. Now remember, that means meaning and purpose and structure. Okay, now below that we have ways in which we display that, in which that is shown, in which that is symbolized, okay? So you can think of the word symbol as another word for meaning. So when somebody says, oh, that symbolizes, or this thing symbolizes, that really is saying this thing means, this thing is displaying, this thing is, the purpose of that is this, okay? So that's the difference between a symbol and a metaphor and simile, is that a symbol is showing you the meaning versus metaphor is showing you how it's comparing two things to another. A simile is the same thing, a metaphor is the same thing. Okay, they're comparing two different things to another. A symbolism is that thing. So, for example, let's look at numbers, language even, but numbers is a lot easier, I think, to understand. Numbers is the concept of math, the concept of physics, of laws, of mathematics exists in this natural divine structure. We all know that the universe is bound by laws. There's this order, there's this structure into the universe in which everything is bound by. There's this order, there's this rational mind, some people say, okay? But you can't, first of all, this area is typically intangible. So this is where, like, Plato talks about, like, forms, okay? This is the idea of concepts existing, of ideas themselves existing, but they're intangible. You can't grasp numbers, okay? You can't feel a number. You can't taste or touch a number, okay? Like the number 2, we're going to use the number 2 throughout this video. The number 2 exists, right? We know it exists as a concept, but by our modern mindsets, isn't it funny that you can't actually taste, touch, feel, hold, or even like you can't do those things with the number 2. So that is important to understand, that the 2 is real, the concept of 2 is real, but it's not at the bottom of the hierarchy, the physical matter in which we can perceive the world. So everybody's always like, oh yeah, well, did that actually happen? It's like, well, does the number 2 actually happen? So this order exists at the top, the divine logos. Now symbols is the next hierarchy, the next tier down, okay? Symbols represent, they show, they display, they are that idea, that order, that structure embodied in a symbol. So the number 2, the actual like drawn out or written out or printed out number 2, the symbol itself is displaying, it's bringing that concept into fruition, okay? It's bringing that concept down to earth. So this is the idea of bringing heaven to earth, okay? Every idea. And this is, we'll get, dude, there's so much into this, it's insane. But I'm going to keep that for another video, okay? So we're bringing these concepts down to a symbol. So it could even be like language. The word what is really, like the word what or house is really just letters and sounds. It doesn't actually mean anything technically from our reductionist, materialistic, rationalistic mindset. It doesn't mean anything. It's just letters and blah, 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 okay? But if you actually view the world through logos, the word what actually means confusion, inquiry, curiosity, okay? So the word what symbolizes that. That's the same thing as language. It's just like the number 2. So that is what symbols are: language, numbers, these things in which things are displayed. It could even be objects themselves, okay? But now below that, you have ways in which so now below symbolism, you have ways in which those symbols are manifested in reality. They're manifested events. They are incarnate, okay? This is Christ incarnate. This is the Logos incarnate. And this is such a deep topic, we're going to save it for another video. But that's what Jesus is. Jesus is the Logos made flesh. So he's the idea of God. God exists as a concept. God exists as a symbol through language, through word, through thought. And then that actually manifests itself in reality through an incarnation, a manifested event. And now we're getting to the physical matter, the physical body of Jesus, the physical body of things, the physical makeup of objects, okay? So let's get rid of the biblical insistence, and we'll go back to the number 2 because it's easy to understand. We have the concept of 2 existing, okay? We know the number 2 exists, okay? We symbolize the number 2 of what that is, all right? And then the number 2 manifests itself everywhere in reality. A pair of shoes, a pair of apples, a pair of Rubik's Cubes, whatever, okay? You can have multiple things where 2 is manifested, okay? And then below that manifested event is the physical matter. That's at the bottom of the pyramid. So that would be the makeup of the apples themselves, the makeup of the cubes themselves, the makeup of the shoes themselves, okay? That is literally the hierarchy of meaning, of order, of truth. So when you look at a story, you can see how, let's say we have the story of Adam and Eve, all right? Adam and Eve exists as this concept, okay? And then, the first man, Adam being humanity, okay? And then the first woman being Eve, okay? That exists as a concept, and then it's displayed through the symbolic story, the symbolic representation through language, through writing it out, through being told over stories over time, okay? And then you have those events, a fall, a separation from God, a fall into temptation, hiding away from God, a falling into sin, whatever, okay? There's so many meanings of that story. You have that manifesting itself in reality, in everyday people's lives, all of the time, okay? And then you also have the physical makeup of that. So this is what science does. Science is focusing on this what, but they're missing all up here of the why, of the what is the purpose, of what is the meaning of all that. Like, yeah, you can tell me all the chemicals in my brain, but why? And then they say evolution, but why? And then they'll say to survive, but why? So you need to understand that you literally view the world through meaning, okay? And everything is everything is structured upwards. So literally to see the world through Christ's eyes, and the Bible talks about, to see the world as God intended it, or in the orthodox tradition, to see the world through a veil, okay, is to literally see everything, everyone, as the way in which God intended it, as the way in which it actually is through meaning and purpose, versus reducing it all down to just atoms and, in reality, that's just a piece of atoms. In reality, the human is just a chemical makeup and I'm just a bunch of things flying around in my head. So you need to understand that when you're perceiving things. So when you're reading a story, when you're reading the Bible, when you're just looking at, for example, I'm going to make the next video on Jacob's ladder, okay? Yeah, you can just say, oh yeah, a ladder is just wood and nails, but a ladder also symbolizes connecting. It means to connect the ground to the heavens, to connect the ground to the heavens, and that you can work your way up on that. There's a bunch of so much symbolic meaning in the world that once you start to view the world through symbols, you realize that, oh, there is actually, or once you start to view the world through symbols or through meaning, because that's what the word symbol is, like, what does this thing mean? Instead of perceiving things as, what is that? What is that made of? What is that actually? Our actual mindset. Did the story of Adam and Eve actually happen? Did the flood actually happen? Whatever, okay? Instead of asking those forensic-like questions, you should look at these stories and say, well, what does this mean? What is the purpose of this story? And you'll see that there is an implicit structure, there's an implicit logos, a mind, an order that's trying to communicate something to you, and that is displayed through this symbolism. And then this symbolism has manifested itself in reality. So that could be the flood itself. But it could also be when you know that the storms are coming in your life and you don't prepare your ark, you're going to drown. You see what I'm saying? Like, these things manifest in reality, and then you have the physical makeup of like, oh yeah, well, I just missed my car payments and didn't pay my friends and all these things. It's like, okay, sure, but there's so many, there's a level of hierarchy in that. So I'm kind of ranting on here. This is a longer video than I actually intended it to be, but I hope that kind of gives you an idea. I'm going to really start diving into this in the up and coming videos, in the stories, in the incarnation, because Christ is that coming down, is that hierarchy from divine logos to being symbolized through the Bible, to then manifesting itself in reality to the birth of Jesus, and then actually being Christ walking around himself as a real person in the flesh. That is what the logos made flesh is. That is that coming down, okay? So that's how we perceive the world, and I hope that's helped you. I hope maybe you can start to look at things differently, to start to look at things through meaning, through purpose. Like, everything has a purpose. Instead of us being nihilistic, instead of us being like, and I'm so guilty of this, like, this stuff is actually, learning this, the reason I'm sharing with you is because it has changed my life for real. Like, there's so many times where you're just like, oh, nothing matters. This nihilistic mindset, nothing matters, I can do anything, at the end of the day I'm going to die. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but not really. Everything matters, okay? Everything has a meaning. Everything exists for a reason. There is meaning in this. Every person has a meaning. There's something in everything. There's a structure, a logos in everything. And I hope you can start to maybe see the world through this symbolic mindset of everything is a symbol. Everything is displaying something. Okay? So I'm going to dive into this deeper so that you guys can start to immerse yourself into this world a little bit like I have. And hopefully you can transform your life, grow closer to God, start questioning things more instead of just this nihilistic mind and just thinking that nothing matters and that we're all just atoms and protons and all these chemicals, okay? But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed this. Please leave comments and questions. I want to make videos for you guys. I want to grow a lot closer to the subscribers because we're really just a community doing this, and we're all working on these things together. We're all in these things together. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're doing well, and I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.